I built a real-time AI interpreter that translates while I'm still talking, for about 4 cents a minute. Not walkie-talkie translation, where you speak, wait, and then hear the other language. This one starts speaking your translation while you're still mid-sentence, in your own voice, across more than 70 languages. It runs on Google's new Gemini 3.5 live translate model. And in my own test, it began translating about 3.5 seconds after I started, and finished about a second after I stopped. If you build voice apps, this is the difference between an app people take turns through and one that feels like a live interpreter. Let me show you exactly how it works, what it costs, and where it still breaks. Here's where this is showing up. Same model, 3 surfaces. For builders, it's a public preview in Google AI Studio and the live API build per second of audio. For teams, it's rolling into Google Meet as a private preview, unlocking more than 2,000 language combinations, up from a handful that only translated to and from English. And for everyone else, it's coming to the Google Translate app, including an Android listening mode that streams the translation straight to your earpiece, so you don't need headphones. The through line is that the same real-time engine now reaches developers, meetings, and phones at once. We're going to stay on the developer surface, the API, because that's the piece you can actually build on. For years, machine translation has worked like a walkie-talkie. You say your full sentence, you stop. The system takes your turn, processes it, and only then plays the translation back. Then the other person does the same. It works, but every exchange has 2 dead spots baked in. The pause while it waits for you to finish, and the pause while it thinks. In a real conversation, that dead air adds up fast, and it kills the flow. Nobody interrupts, nobody overlaps, everything is stop and go. The whole feel is transactional. What you actually want is the thing a human interpreter does. Start translating while the speaker is still talking. That is exactly the shift here. So here's the shift, drawn to scale, with the continuous timings taken from my own test. Up top is turn-based. You speak for 12 seconds. Then there's dead air while it waits and processes, and only after that does the translation play, so one exchange would stretch out toward 30 seconds. Down below is continuous, the live translate model. It starts translating while I'm still talking. In my test, the first translated audio came about 3.5 seconds after I began speaking, and the translation finished just about a second after I stopped. Same sentence, but the whole turn wraps in around 13 seconds instead of nearly 30. These are single-run numbers on my home connection, directional, not a benchmark. And to be clear, the streaming itself isn't the new trick. Gemini's own voice chat model already streams audio, but it still works in turns, waiting for you to finish before it answers. What's different here is that Live Translate drops the turn entirely and interprets mid-sentence. That's the shape that matters. It stops taking turns and starts interpreting. Under the hood, it's a streaming pipeline, and every stage matters. Your microphone audio streams up in small chunks. In the demo, that's 16 kHz mono sent about 10 times a second. First, auto detection. You don't tell it the input language, it identifies the source across more than 70 languages on its own. Then, the live translation stage, which streams the translated speech back concurrently, staying just a few seconds behind the speaker. Crucially, it tries to preserve your voice, your intonation, your pacing, your pitch, so the output sounds like you, not a robot. And finally, every piece of audio it generates is watermarked with Synth ID, Google's imperceptible marker that flags it as AI generated. Mic, detect, translate, preserve, watermark. That's the whole chain. Let me zoom out to the architecture, because it's simpler than you'd think. Your audio goes over a single, persistent WebSocket connection to the live API. Not one request per sentence, but one open, two-way stream for the whole session. Audio flows up, translated audio flows back down the same pipe, continuously. Inside, the model auto-detects the language, translates, matches your voice, and stamps the output with Synth ID before it streams back. Because the connection stays open, the model always has the running context of what you've said, and that's what lets it translate mid-sentence instead of waiting for a full turn. There's no separate speech-to-text step you manage, no text stage in the middle. It's audio in, translated audio out, over one live socket. And this is the whole trick, the config. You create a live connect config and set the response mode to audio. You turn on input and output transcription if you want the text alongside, which is how I captured what it heard and what it said. But the line that turns a normal live session into a translator is this one: translation config. You give it a target language code, here, Spanish, and echo target language, and that's it. No custom pipeline, no stitching 3 services together. The rest of my script is just plumbing. Open the socket, stream microphone chunks up, play the audio that comes back. The intelligence lives in that one config block. That's why this is a short script, not a project. So let's run it for real. I fed the model a 12-second English clip and asked for Spanish, streaming the audio in real time, just like a live mic. Watch the timestamps. The connection opens in a fraction of a second. Around 3.5 seconds in, the first translated Spanish audio comes back, while the English is still playing. It tracks me the whole way, and finishes translating about a second after my English ends. You can hear that it largely keeps the pacing and tone of the original voice. And the cost? This entire run metered out to less than 1 penny, about 9/10 of a cent. Again, these are my own single run numbers, not a published benchmark. But you're watching a real session against a real API, not a mock-up. And don't just take my word for it. Here's the actual audio from that run. English going in, then the Spanish it produced, and right after, the same thing in Japanese. Listen.
Hola. Estoy probando la nueva función de traducción en vivo de Google. Debería escuchar mi voz en inglés y repetir las mismas palabras en español. Solo unos segundos.
こんにちは。Google の新しいライブ翻訳モデルをテストしています。私の声を英語で聞き取り、同じ言葉をスペイン語で話します。数秒。
Now the honest part, because this is a preview, and it shows. First, voice preservation is inconsistent. The docs themselves warn that the copied voice can drift. It might shift after a long pause, guess the wrong gender at the start, or get stuck on a single voice when several people are talking quickly. So it often sounds like you, but not always. Second, that automatic language detection can slip. Heavy accents, very similar languages like Spanish and Portuguese, or switching languages rapidly mid-conversation can all trip up the input transcript. The good news is, the translated audio usually stays accurate, even when the transcript wobbles. But if you're building on this, treat both the voice match and the detection as best effort, not guaranteed. A few things you should know before you ship on this. 1. Every single piece of audio the model generates is watermarked with Synth ID. It's imperceptible, you won't hear it, but it marks the output as AI generated, which matters as synthetic voices spread everywhere. 2. This is an audio-only interface. You stream audio in, you get audio out. There's no text prompt going in. And 3, on cost and privacy. There is a free tier, but on the free tier your input can be used to improve Google's products, while paid tier data is not used for training. So for anything sensitive, that free versus paid line is the one to read carefully. None of this is a deal breaker. It's just the fine print that decides whether this fits your use case. So which model do you actually reach for? Because Google ships 2 live models here, and this is exactly where people get confused. Gemini 3.1 Flash Live is the agent. It listens, it reasons, it can call your tools and APIs, it takes in text and even video, and it acts on your behalf, holding a back-and-forth conversation in turns. Gemini 3.5 Live Translate is the interpreter. It does exactly one thing: turn speech in one language into speech in another, continuously, with no turns, no tools, and no text input. Same live API underneath, but opposite jobs. One thinks and acts. The other does exactly one thing: translate, and it does it continuously, without ever waiting for a turn. So match the model to the job. Reach for Flash Live when the thing needs to think or do something, a voice assistant you talk to hands-free, a support bot that looks up an order and resolves it, a kiosk that takes an order and hits your backend. Reach for Live Translate when you only need faithful speech-to-speech. A live interpreter inside a video call, simultaneous translation at a conference, a front desk or travel translator between 2 people. Here's the simple rule. If it has to answer a question or take an action, that's Flash Live. If it just has to repeat what was said in another language, that's Live Translate. And you can even chain them. Translate first, then hand the text to an agent that reasons and acts. Let's make the money concrete, because it's the part that decides whether you can actually build on this. Pricing is per token of audio, metered at 25 tokens per second in each direction. Input audio runs $3.50 per million tokens. Output audio, which includes the model's thinking, runs $21 per million. Put both directions together, and you land at roughly 3.7 cents per minute of live translation. Call it about 4 cents. That's why my 12-second test costs less than a penny. At that price, always-on translation in a product isn't a luxury feature anymore. A long meeting is cents, not dollars. Just remember it's a preview, so treat both the price and the limits as subject to change. So, 3 takeaways through the architect's lens. 1. The real unlock here isn't translation, we've had that. It's continuous, overlapping translation. When the machine stops waiting for your turn, a translated conversation finally feels live, and that changes what you can build. 2. It's a scalpel, not a Swiss Army knife. Audio in, audio out, no tools, no text, so use it for exactly that, and keep your reasoning and actions in a separate agent. 3. At roughly 4 cents a minute, real-time interpretation is now cheap enough to design into ordinary products, not just flagship demos, but it's a preview, so build with the voice and detection limits in mind. If this kind of hands-on breakdown is useful, subscribe, it genuinely helps. I'll see you in the next one.